What is your anticipation of how this will net out in the vote based on what we've seen previously and how you're expecting the stock to move coming into this?
Yeah, thanks for having me. We think the shareholder vote is going to pass. I think it's a mix of promises made, promises kept, which is kind of what we saw at the 2018 vote hold serve. Running the math on most major institutions and how they voted last time, you still do get a narrow passage if voting holds serve. And retail, Elon has indicated, is 90% in favor. It's just a question of the variable of what percentage of retail investors are actually voting for this. In terms of the stock reaction, we've characterized it, and I think most of the investors we talk to agree, is it's a small win, big loss scenario. In the event it passes, stock's probably up slightly on Elon retaining Elon, the AI efforts that he sees in the company, and in the event it fails, I think it introduces risk that ultimately we don't think Elon's going to leave. We think developing AI in Tesla for a lot of reasons makes sense in terms of cost of capital, the liquidity profile, but it does introduce the risk that he spends more time developing AI and shifting talent elsewhere. So I think that at least the narrative that he could spend more time elsewhere would gain steam, and the stock would be down quite considerably in the event this fails.
Yeah, Ron, just drilling down a bit more, I guess, what more specifically do you think that stock reaction to the downside, if those risks, if it's not approved, what that ultimately looks like?
Yeah, we haven't put specific numbers around the downside. It's really tough to quantify too, but I would say that our price target is about $45 lower than here. I think there's a considerable amount of premium for Elon Musk being engaged and developing AI in Tesla currently, just based on where we think the fundamental value of the business is versus the, I would say, more hope-fueled parts of the business. But in terms of specific quantification, we have not put a number out.
Elon Musk has said in the past that he might reallocate how he spends his time if this vote doesn't go through in his favor. What would you expect then?
Yeah, we've seen some capital raising at XAI and I think his other ventures, but ultimately the cost of capital at Tesla is so much lower than any of his other startups that if he's serious about developing AI, and I appreciate his Terminator-esque tail risk of if AI becomes sentient, but ultimately the cost of capital to develop it at Tesla is much lower. There's a lot of talent already in place. Outside of the control elements, developing it in Tesla has the most prospects for success, I think, ultimately.
Ron, when it comes to the shareholder vote, exactly how that's going to break down, of course, a lot of it is just a question of how many of the individual shareholders, how many of them actually cast votes, and of course, where the institutional side of this all comes in. If you take a look back at 2018, big institutions were pretty much split a couple of years ago. Do you think that's likely going to be the case this time around?
Yeah, and we've seen that publicly with various institutions announcing for or against it in advance of this vote. I think ultimately we think institutions largely hold serve with how they voted in 2018, and that is why we think this vote passes. But if a few large institutions pivot from how they voted in 2018, whether that is for their own internal reasons or because of a shift in their ownership base, that could swing the vote more negatively. But ultimately, if votes hold how they did in 2018, this will pass as long as retail turnout is relatively strong.